is our review of the Giant Propel Advanced SL. Now, the new Propel replaces the outgoing model, which came out in 2013, and the big difference here is that the new one is only available with disc brakes. But that's not the only difference. All the tube shapes, although they look similar, have been completely redesigned, and Giant has used a combination of computational fluid dynamics studies combined with extensive wind tunnel testing to optimize the tube shapes and make them more aerodynamic. And part of the process has involved using more wind angles than before. So when the original Propel was designed, Giant designed it at 0 degrees yaw. Now, in real life, wind angles of 0 degrees yaw aren't very common. It very rarely happens that you're just riding into a block, headwind, bang on, head on. So in theory, the new bike should be much more aerodynamic in real world conditions. So we haven't had a chance to properly aero test the new Giant Propel disc yet, but rest assured, it's on our to-do list and we will be heading to a velodrome to do it in the future. But it's interesting because the original Propel hasn't performed that well when we've aero tested it against other competing aero bikes. So first up, we're going to talk about the spec. Now, we've been riding two different models of this bike. The Zero model, which features Dura Ace and is the top of the line model, but also this Ultegra Di2 equipped version as well. Now, the Ultegra version comes with the same sprint shifters that the Di2 version comes with as well. And these are really cool for changing gear when you're in the drops. Now, the spec is really good because you get nice deep section aero wheels that are tubeless ready out the box. And it's really good to see that Giant are pushing tubeless technology because it offers lower rolling resistance and lower puncture risk as well. Another thing that you've got here is the integrated seat post. That's quite a key feature. It sort of saves weight and, according to Giant, can also improve comfort. Up front, we have Giant's new integrated Aero cockpit and stem. Now, the way this works is that you have this top cap running across the top of the stem and the cables are housed underneath that, meaning you can actually change different length stems, and then you've got the Aero bar here. And it is really a game of spot the cable. The cables are really nicely hidden and integrated there and out of the wind. And I also kind of like the practicality of this because it has a separate end cap. It's not a full-on integrated one-piece bar and stem. And this helps with adjustability. It means you can tune the exact sort of size bar and length stem you want a bit more easily. And it helps with packing the bike as well if you transport it and take it away in a bike bag, because it means that you can leave the stem on and just take the bars off. Also, we kind of have an issue with this top cap as well. It's the way it looks. So right now, this bike is running 15 mils of spacers, and I was running 15 mils of spacers, which isn't much at all, but it looks like you're running loads of spacers because the way that the top cap comes back here. So if I cover it up, you can see that looks pretty normal and like a pretty normal saddle to bar drop. But when you've got the top cap there, all of a sudden the bike just kind of looks a bit more sportive, which isn't kind of the right look for an aero bike. Other details on the spec that we should point out is that Giant is supplying a shallower wheel at the front and a deeper wheel at the back. And this is said to be for a combination of improved aerodynamics and handling, because having a less deep wheel at the front means that the front end can be less twitchy if it comes into side winds. And also an interesting feature that I wanted to point out is the front of the headset here. So you actually have these spacers, they have like a rubber thing going along to help with the cable movement on the inside. And you have these little flaps that move as well, a bit like the vector wings on the Trek Madones. A couple of other nice aero spec features that are on the bike that are worth talking about are the integrated Garmin mount, which is Giant's own and designed to fit in with the stem. Now the nice thing here is that this is included with the bike, so you don't have to go and try and shop around and find one afterwards. Once you have your Garmin on there, it sits really nice and flush with the stem and everything looks really neat. And also I like the fact that the through axles on the front are leverless. You need a 5mm Allen key to get the wheels in and out. But by removing that lever that sticks out the side, you save roughly a watt of aero drag. So I'm all about the marginal gains. So we've been testing both models of the Propel Advanced SL. Si has been testing this one, the SL1, which comes with a complete Ultegra Di2 group set. And I've been testing the higher spec SL0, which is 8999, but it does come with Dura Ace and also the Dura Ace power meter. The Propel Advanced SL is the top of the range frame set that Giant offers, but there is also another 2 tiers of frame set. So the one below this is perhaps a lot more affordable and is known as the Giant Propel Advanced Pro. Now this frame set uses a slightly less expensive carbon fibre layup, and also, something I quite like, it no longer has the integrated seat post. Instead there's just a normal aero tube that slides into the frame. What is the new Giant Propel Advanced SL like to ride? Well, we've been riding it in a number of different places. I took it to the cobbles of northern France, Si took it to Mallorca, and I also took it to Andalusia in Spain. And I've ridden it over a range of terrain. Now the first thing is, it's an incredibly stiff bike. It's an out and out race machine. And on the flat, it feels brilliant. It's just noticeably aero, it feels fast, you feel like you're gaining that aero advantage. It is tangible, you can feel it. And it also handles really well as well. I felt very confident immediately as soon as I started descending on it for the first few times, and just sort of felt at home. You know, it is a great race package, but when I really started to push it on the descents and go really fast and also really turn hard and carve hard into corners, it felt a little bit chattery. And this is something that Si found as well. Now, what we mean by this is that it's so stiff, it's almost like it starts to skip and vibrate a little bit on the surface of the road. And this is something that we found the Cannondale Super 6 Evo does really, really well. It's kind of that perfect blend of stiffness, but also a bit of compliance that helps it stick to the road in a really smooth way and has excellent handling. Now, something that probably helps this as well and maybe makes it a little bit more chattery and gives a bit more vibration is the fact that although you have 25mm tyres on here, they're coming up pretty narrow. Giant's proprietary wheels, they feel stiff when you're sprinting on them, they feel good at handling and stuff like that, but the wheel width is quite narrow, and so consequently Giant's own tyres are coming up quite narrow as well. And so although they claim to be 25s, they're kind of more like 23s. If we're going to criticise the bike in this area, I would like to see wider rims from Giant and wider tyres as well on otherwise what is an excellent bike. And there's plenty of clearance, we should point that out. Although the tyres are quite small, there's plenty of clearance, and I have put in some 28mm Continentals, which were coming up at 30mm. I'm really glad to see that Giant are speccing tubeless out the box. I think that's great, but I'm not convinced that the Giant tubeless tyres are the best we've ever used. So we have had quite a big sidewall slash in them, and also I encountered a blowout when I was going 52 kilometers an hour on the front as well. Now again, this comes down to the width. I feel that if I'd been on a wider tyre, it wouldn't have blown out. Had them at about 90 psi at the time, and I hit a slight bump in the road, and my friend who I was with riding behind me didn't blow out, and he hit the same piece of road at the same speed. He was on a 25mm Continental tyre. Often when I test bikes, I try out the saddle that they come with, but then end up swapping it for a saddle that I get along with, because saddle choice is very personal. But I have to say, I have been really impressed with the saddle that comes on the Propel. I've kept it on, and I've done some really long rides and taken the bike to Spain. So yeah, it's a good saddle, and it's got carbon rails. Some people worry about disc brakes on an aero road bike because disc brakes traditionally add a lot of weight, but with the new Ultegra and new Dura Ace group sets, you're not really paying a weight penalty. And I've been really impressed with how they feel. I mean, on the descents, they're absolutely brilliant. As a rider, I find I gain far more confidence and just far more control descending on a bike with disc brakes. And, you know, if I was picking a bike for myself, I would choose disc brakes on it absolutely 100%. You know, taking it down some of the descents, trying to hold on to Llanto Barca in Spain, who's an ex-professional and an excellent descender, I was able to keep up with him by using disc brakes. And that isn't something that I would have felt confident with on carbon rims, because I tend to sort of overheat them a fair bit and lose the braking efficiency, and I lose confidence. I've been traveling with this bike and riding it for a month, so I've got a good idea of what it's like to live with. Now, the first thing is that the integrated cockpit design is possible to take it apart and fly with it. Much more easy than it is, say, on the Trek Madone and also the Specialized Venge Vias. But once you take this top cap off, which I just can't get over the look of this top cap. I'm sorry, like, I know it's subjective, I know it's personal, but I think the top cap looks horrendous. But back onto what I was saying, once you take the top cap off, all the cables that are under there, they kind of spew out like intestines. And then when you're putting the top cap back on, it's kind of a real fiddle to get all the cables inside and underneath that as you put the 4 bolts in. And also, I am a bit worried about the longevity of the 4 bolts. They're very thin and they require a very small Allen key, and I would be worried about rounding them out, having travelled with this bike before. So if you travelled with it multiple times, that could be an issue. You have to be very careful when unscrewing and screwing this back on. The other thing with regards to practicality is the integrated seat post. The reason for this is that you have to cut it in order to get your size right. And although there is a bit of adjustment available with this top cap, it certainly limits you a little bit if you go to sell the bike to selling it to someone who is your height or smaller. And also it can be a little bit of a pain when you're flying with the bike and you're trying to fit it into some bike bags and bike boxes. Something it's always important to say is what this compares to other bikes that you may be considering. And I guess the obvious comparison is the S-Works Venge Vias disc. Now, in terms of ride quality, both are pretty similar, I'd say, but the Giant has a big advantage, and that is weight, and that is noticeable. This bike climbs really well, and it's commendable in terms of its weight. So the advanced SL0 I had with Dura Ace on it was only around 7 kilos for a medium large, like bang on 7 kilos. And if we compare that to an S-Works disc, then you're looking at about 1 kilo heavier. Now that amount of weight really is noticeable, and I never felt when I was going on long climbs in Spain that I needed a lighter bike. It climbs really well and it feels great. Plus, I feel that although the front end can be a bit of a faff, it is more practical than the S-Works Venge Vias. So personally, if it was me, between the two, although this isn't perfect, I'd go for the Propel. Although the Giant Propel is a very, very stiff bike, it is a pleasure to ride. You know, I felt comfortable riding it on long adventures, and I didn't come back with aches. I didn't come back feeling like it had beaten me up. And on the cobbles, I did get shaken around a lot, but once I changed the narrow Giant tyres that come with the bike for a set of much wider Continentals, it actually felt pretty good. And the great thing is that you've got plenty of clearance to put wider tyres on there. So to summarise, the Giant Propel disc is a great bike. It feels tangibly fast, you know, you've got a great spec with it, and it's very stiff, it handles great, and we've enjoyed riding it on long rides. But it isn't perfect. We're not a fan of the integrated seat post and the lack of practicality it offers. And also, as mentioned, we don't like the look of the headset. It is subjective, but we're not a fan of that. And also, this whole thing is a bit of a fiddle. And the other thing is the tyres. We would like to see Giant speccing wider tyres, but we must stress that although Giant haven't quite got it right with the width of their wheels, otherwise the wheels feel fast and they're plenty stiff as well, so they are a good set of hoops. One thing we are wondering though, and we'd love to hear your opinions on this in the comment section, is why are more of the Team Sunweb riders not choosing to use the Propel disc? Why are they choosing the TCR? Is it because this is only available with disc brakes? We're not sure, but we'd like to know what you think on this matter, so let us know. And stay tuned for more reviews as well. We've got some exciting ones coming up in the future, including the S-Works Tarmac and the Merida Reacto. So subscribe to the Cycling Weekly channel if you want to see more reviews. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. But until then, I'll see you next time.